What would it be like to be a behavioral scientist? Now, you might be thinking that world, that career is entirely based within academia. Well, you're partly right on that. However, there is this whole other side of it as well, within the private sector, that professionals can really thrive. And that's what we're going to explore today. I have this really exceptional guest. Her name is Dr. Abbie Maroño, and she is renowned for her knowledge and skill relating to behavioral science, relating to psychology, and more specifically, nonverbal communication. She's a regular contributor to Forbes. She's also a keynote speaker, in demand that way. And also too, she is highly respected in the private sector. So she breaks down her journey, how she got there, why she left academia. We also get into some of the rewards, some of the challenges of her work, and she even has some direct advice for those who are looking to transition from the world of academia into the private sector. As always, there's so much more I can cram into full-length audio versions, these conversations that I have. But, I think this highlights video compilation will give you some basis for just the goodness contained within this talk. So I do encourage you, again, to check out the full-length audio version. You can do so wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... Well, I think it's about time to get into this video, so why don't we? Okay, well, probably the most sensible thing to do here is to start with an explanation of what a behavioral scientist does. So here's Dr. Maroño explaining that for us.
Behavioral science is so broad. I am a behavioral scientist in my role at social engineer. So I study human beings. Now, I'm a researcher. I conduct experiments. I look at the psychological mechanisms that underpin human behavior.
Well, next up is a clip of Dr. Maroño explaining the company that she works for, as well as the type of work that they're involved in. And I gotta say, this is a sign of the times that we're living in. Like, the type of work that this company does just would not have existed 5-10 years ago. Really, really interesting stuff here. And it just shows you the world of opportunity that is out there and how it's constantly evolving. So check it out.
Now, you have professional social engineers who run social engineering tests on people's human security network. So a company could be, say, a big tech company or a bank. They're at risk of fraud. They're at risk of vectors, which is the phishing, vishing, and smishing, which are terms meaning, email phishing, voice phishing, so a fraudulent phone call, or smishing a text message. If an employee gets one of those things and it has a malicious link attached and they click it, now all the data is at risk. So you need to understand how to protect against those. And what we do as social engineers is we run those kind of fake tests. We run it as simulated tests, but we don't use the manipulation tactics that the actual con artists will use. We don't use things like fear. We don't use anger. We don't create negative emotion to get what we need. We use things like cooperation enhancement and principles of trust, because if I use shame to get information from you, how can I teach you to be better? How can I teach you to be more aware? It's not going to help you. So what we can do is use professional social engineers to access that information and get through the human security network using techniques that won't psychologically harm those individuals. And obviously we don't just, call up random banks and do it. We have contracts with them. They hire us to do it.
Now, in bringing all of this together, here's a clip of Dr. Maroño explaining the work that she specifically does within this company, Social Engineer. So check it out.
And maybe in the most generalized sense, we could hear, some of the activities that you are involved with, at Social Engineer, being the director of education.
Yes. So sadly, my role may not be as exciting as the listeners may expect from our last segment, because I'm the director of education here. I am a behavioral scientist. Mm-hmm. I'm not a professional social engineer. I work with them and I work as the director of education here. So it might sound boring to some people, but I love my job and I love the work that I get to do. And if I'm not doing speeches, and we'll talk about that later, most of what I do is behind a desk. I spend 90% of my time behind a desk, and my job can vary. So I create courses, both in person and online. Everything that is education or science-based, I've created it. I have my hands in it. We recently just finished creating our first ever audio course. And it will be an audio course on information elicitation, which I'm very excited about. I also host a podcast, which is teaching concepts within the realm of psychology. I do internal training. So I make sure all of the courses that we have, all of the training that we do is based on rigorous scientific principles. And as science is constantly evolving, we need to be constantly evolving with that. So I have a whole day every week dedicated to my own research. So reading academic papers, making sure that I'm up to date with the literature on everything that we need to know, as well as conducting my own research. I conduct research internationally, and I'm a member of many research groups, as well as run my own research group. And then I write blogs. I do a lot of interviews, like I recently did Forbes Breaking News, and I've done a few with them. And then, of course, I do things like speaking. So I have various topics which people will hire us out to do talks and speeches. And that's always fun, getting to go to different locations.
This next clip represents just how much possibility is out there if you have passion in what you're doing, if you have an inquisitive mind, and also too, if you're open to different possibilities, if you're open to different opportunities to meet people, to speak to people, and quite frankly, to put yourself out there. So I will tell you, this clip opens up with Dr. Maroño explaining a time during her undergrad journey where she's speaking to one of her psych professors.
And I was in the course of psychology. And I gave him this idea, and he said to me, "Have you told this to anybody?" And I said, "No, not anybody yet." And he said, "Well, don't, because it's not been done. So if you want to do it, I'll work with you and help you create this, and we'll turn it into an academic study." So I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to." And he helped me so much. And we had ended up having a contact with Joe Navarro. And we were building on some of his theories in a very unique way. And we got in contact with him, and he agreed to work with us. So this person that I'd admired in the field, this ex-FBI agent, this nonverbal communication expert, and the paper was in nonverbal communication, he had reached out and said, "Yes, absolutely, I'd love to work on this with you." So that really fueled the interest as well.
Oh, yeah.
But I still had the goal of, I want to be FBI. This was just an interest. It was never my goal to be an academic at that point. I really wanted to be a practitioner. But in creating that research, you come in with a question of, I wonder why this works.
There it is.
And then when we finished the paper, I discovered something. Everything that you publish is because something new has been discovered. And the second that paper got published, that was it for me. That goal of FBI, I knew it would never be a reality because I was hooked. I was just hooked on research. And then I dedicated all of my free time outside of studying for my degree to do more research. And I said to him, "Do you have any more ideas?" And I would constantly come to him and then Professor David Clark, who worked with David a lot. And the three of us would have little coffee meetings and talk about nonverbals. And Joe ended up being in another paper with us. And then we'd started working with FBI agents currently in the field using their data. And the more research I did, the more questions I had.
Right.
The more you discover, there's that saying that the more you know, the less you know.
Yeah.
And there was just so many questions. And I realized that I want to dedicate the rest of my life to asking and answering questions, because everything has an answer. We just don't know what the answer is. It's the same in every science. We may not understand it yet, but one day we could. And the answer is there. We just need to use the right methods to figure it out. And that, to me, it's so exciting.
Now, this next clip represents a big portion of the conversation that we had, and it was on this notion of academia and, as professionals, why a lot of people are leaving that world, unfortunately, but also speaks to the point of corporate, of being in industry, and what types of possibilities exist for people with a strong background, with a passion for something coming out of the academic world. So here's a clip of Dr. Maroño explaining that, the reasoning for her at least, why she decided to leave and what opportunities did exist for her.
I want to be around people that are hungry for that knowledge.
Yeah.
A lot of students are very hungry for the knowledge, but the knowledge that I wanted to teach was at a very different level than what I was teaching at university. And there's a difference between students wanting the knowledge and then people in industry, because people in industry wanting that knowledge, they want it because it's vital for their careers. So you see this real hunger to learn in a very different sense. And I had begun moving from the dark psychology into more positive psych. So I moved away from things like FBI and serial killers and that field into more how to create cooperation and how to create trust. And in working with Joe, he introduced me to his way of life. He works in corporate, he teaches corporate, he trains, and I sat in some of his training, and it was just the atmosphere in the room. It was that hunger.
So different
that
than what you'd
drive.
experienced. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was not what I expected. And I realized that I wanted to bring what I do in academia into corporate. And that sounds really simple, but there is this big divide between academia and industry where they don't really communicate and they don't often see the value in each other. And the more I worked with practitioners, the more I realized, wow, what you have is so important and it's so different than what I have. And imagine what we could do if we worked together, rather than me just staying in this academic bubble and you just staying in this bubble of industry. What if we united our forces?
Well, this next clip represents a take on career pathways. And I got to level with you here. I mean, I've spoken to over 100 people now at this point within this podcast about careers, about career pathways. And this was just a really unique perspective, a unique look at it all. So I really wanted to ensure that this information got out in front of a lot of people, because I think it's really insightful and it's really helpful to hear about, different ways you can position yourself for success, different ways of finding what might drive you forward, find different ways of, sinking yourself into one particular area of a field. So here's Dr. Maroño explaining this.
When it comes to the pathways, people see it as black or white. They see it as either I know exactly what I want to do and I'm going to do this exact thing, or I have no idea and I'm going to be super flexible. But there is an in between. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew it was psychology. Just like with research, I always knew I loved nonverbals and I knew I loved the field of cooperation and forensic psychology. But within my research field, because I knew that I didn't want to take one route and only one route and then think, what if I'd taken a different route? So when you look at my publications, I have publications in counterterrorism, in serial killings, in cooperation, in mimicry, and all these things that you think that's so random. Why are you doing all these different fields? And for me, that was my way of testing the waters. Within this one field of psychology, I studied lots of different areas and did research in lots of different areas. I knew I loved nonverbals, but I didn't want to be completely, shutter blind to everything else. I knew that I needed to have some flexibility, and I ended up going down the route of nonverbals anyway. But I tried lots of different things on the way, and that's perfectly okay to do. And people can do it with minors and majors. And if you get towards the end of a degree and think this actually isn't the degree that I want to do, well, change it. You don't have to stick to that one path. You can change. And there is an in between where you can know mostly where you want to be and what you want to do and still have an air of flexibility. It's not black or white when it comes to these things.
Well, unfortunately, I think we are drawing to a close within this video here, but I do encourage you to check out the full-length audio version. I mean, within that, there's so much more that is covered. We get into direct rewards, direct challenges of the work. We also get into her work within a nonprofit organization, how she's serving others within that role. We have a look at technology, AI, and how that's shifting and changing this world all around. So all up, I mean, there's a lot more to devour if you are getting a taste for this, if you are realizing that this could be something of interest for you. So you can find that audio version wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... And one last request here. I mean, at this point in the video, it's always that kind of awkward time, but I would encourage a like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way for this YouTube algorithm to know that this content matters. But having said that, please stay tuned for the next episode of Life as a. It'll be coming at you right next week. So until then, we'll see ya.